My true story from Missouri. He took my money, then said, "You're not welcome here. My name is Dorothy Mae Henderson, and I'm 73 years old. People always tell me I look younger, but some days I feel every one of those years weighing on my shoulders like stones. I'm writing this letter from a little apartment in Springfield, Missouri, where I've been living for the past 8 months. It's not much, just a one-bedroom place with thin walls and a window that overlooks the parking lot of a grocery store. But it's mine. And after what I've been through, having something that's truly mine means more than you could ever imagine. I need to tell you about my son Michael. He's 38 now, my only child. And for most of his life, he was the light of my world. His father died when Michael was just 12, and it was just the two of us against everything. I worked double shifts at the textile factory, then later at the diner on Highway 65, making sure he had everything he needed. I went without new clothes, without vacations, without so many things just so he could have a chance at a better life than mine. Michael grew up to be a good man, or so I thought. He became an electrician, married a sweet girl named Sarah when he was 25, and they had 2 beautiful children, Emma and Jake. I was so proud of him, so proud of the family he'd built. Every Sunday we'd have dinner together at my house, the same house where I'd raised him, where his father and I had brought him home from the hospital, where every room held memories of our life together. It was a modest 2-story house on Maple Street, built in 1952. The kitchen was small but cozy, with yellow wallpaper that I'd put up myself in 1985. The living room had my late husband's recliner, still positioned perfectly to watch the evening news. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms, mine, Michael's old room that I'd turned into a sewing room, and a guest room where my grandchildren would sleep when they visited. The basement was finished, with wood paneling and a small bar where Harold used to watch baseball games. That house was everything to me. It held 43 years of my life. Every Christmas morning, every birthday party, every scraped knee that needed bandaging, every homework session at the kitchen table. The mortgage had been paid off for 15 years, and it was the only valuable thing I owned besides my late husband's life insurance policy, which I'd never touched. But then, 3 years ago, everything changed. Michael and Sarah got divorced. It was messy and painful, and I watched my son struggle with the custody arrangements, the division of assets, the loneliness that came with starting over at 35. Sarah got the house they'd shared, and Michael moved into a small apartment across town. The children stayed with him every other weekend, but I could see how much the whole situation was eating at him. That's when he met Rebecca. She was 32, divorced herself, with a teenage daughter named Madison. Rebecca worked as a real estate agent, and she was everything Sarah wasn't: confident, ambitious, always talking about opportunities and investments. She wore expensive clothes and drove a new car, and she had this way of making you feel like you weren't thinking big enough, like you were settling for less than you deserved. At first, I was happy for Michael. He smiled again, laughed more. Rebecca seemed to genuinely care about him, and she was good with Emma and Jake. She'd take them shopping, help with their homework, and she even suggested family activities that included me. I thought she was exactly what my son needed, someone strong who could help him rebuild his life. 6 months after they started dating, Michael asked Rebecca to marry him. She said yes, and they began planning not just a wedding, but a whole new life together. That's when Rebecca started talking about the business opportunity that would change everything. "Dorothy," she said to me one evening when they came over for dinner, "I found the perfect location for a boutique hotel. It's in Branson, right in the heart of the tourist district. The building needs work, but the potential is incredible. Michael has the electrical skills to handle the renovations, and I have the real estate connections to make this successful." She pulled out a folder full of photographs and financial projections. The building was indeed in a prime location, a 3-story Victorian house that had been converted into a bed and breakfast years ago, but had been sitting empty for 2 years. The asking price was $285,000, and Rebecca estimated they'd need another $150,000 for renovations and startup costs. "The only problem," Michael said, looking at me with those same hopeful eyes he'd had as a child, "is that we don't have enough for the down payment. The bank wants 20% down, plus we need money for the renovations. Rebecca's credit is good, but she's already stretched from her divorce. And my credit," he didn't need to finish. I knew the divorce had been hard on him financially. "What are you thinking?" I asked, though I already suspected where this conversation was heading. Rebecca leaned forward, her eyes bright with excitement. "We were hoping you might consider being our business partner. Your house is worth about $180,000, right? If you sold it and invested with us, we could make this work. And Dorothy, you wouldn't just be helping us. You'd be securing your own future, too. Once the hotel is successful, you'd have a steady income stream for the rest of your life." The idea hit me like a physical blow. Sell my house? Leave the only home I'd ever known? But as I looked at Michael's face, I saw something there that broke my heart. Desperation mixed with hope. The look of a man who needed his mother's help one more time. "Where would I live?" I asked quietly. "With us," Rebecca said immediately. "The hotel will have private quarters for the owners. A beautiful suite on the 3rd floor with its own kitchen and sitting area. You'd have your independence, but you'd also be part of our business, part of our family. Emma and Jake would love having their grandmother so close." Michael reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom, I know it's a lot to ask, but this could be our chance at something really special, a family business that we build together, and you'd never have to worry about money again." I spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about it. The rational part of my brain told me it was risky, that I was too old to start over, that I should keep my house and my security. But the mother in me, the part that had always put Michael's needs first, couldn't ignore the opportunity to help him succeed. On the 4th day, I called him and said yes. The next few months were a whirlwind. I contacted a real estate agent, not Rebecca, as she said it would be a conflict of interest, and put my house on the market. It sold within 3 weeks for $175,000. Slightly less than we'd hoped, but still enough to make the hotel dream a reality. I remember the day I signed the papers. I sat in that sterile office watching as 4 decades of my life were reduced to a legal document and a check. The realtor was chatty, talking about market trends and interest rates, but I barely heard her. All I could think about was the first night Harold and I had spent in that house. How we'd sat on the living room floor eating takeout Chinese food because we didn't have any furniture yet. The hardest part was packing up my belongings. Each room held so many memories. In the kitchen, I found the recipe cards my mother had given me when I first married Harold, handwritten in her careful script. In the bedroom closet, I discovered Harold's old work shirts that I'd never been able to throw away, still carrying the faint scent of his cologne. The basement held boxes of Michael's school projects, his Little League trophies, and photo albums documenting every milestone of his childhood. My neighbors came to help with the packing. Mrs. Patterson from next door brought over casseroles and helped me wrap my china. Mr. Rodriguez from across the street loaded boxes into his truck and drove them to storage. These people had been part of my life for decades, and saying goodbye to them felt like losing family. "Dorothy, you sure about this?" Mrs. Patterson asked as we wrapped my wedding china in newspaper. "Seems like a big risk at your age." I paused, holding one of my grandmother's teacups. "Maybe it is," I said. "But Michael needs me. And maybe it's time for an adventure." She nodded, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "Just promise me you'll be careful. Sometimes children don't appreciate what their parents sacrifice for them." Her words stayed with me as I finished packing, but I pushed the doubt aside. This was my chance to help my son build something lasting, something we could all be proud of. But Michael was so grateful, so excited. He hugged me tight when I handed him the check and said, "Mom, you're incredible. This is going to be amazing. We're going to build something beautiful together." The wedding was small but lovely, held in the backyard of Rebecca's sister's house. I wore a blue dress that I'd bought specially for the occasion, and Michael looked so handsome in his navy suit. During the ceremony, when the pastor talked about the joining of 2 families, I felt hopeful about the future we were all building together. The first few months of marriage were wonderful. Michael and Rebecca found a temporary rental house in Branson, and I moved in with them while we worked on the hotel renovations. The house was cramped, just 2 bedrooms, so I slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. But everyone was so excited about the project that the inconvenience seemed manageable. During the day, Michael would work on the electrical systems while Rebecca handled the business side, permits, licensing, marketing plans. I helped wherever I could, painting walls, organizing supplies, even learning to use a spreadsheet program on Rebecca's computer to track expenses. In the evenings, we'd sit around the kitchen table, planning room designs, and discussing the grand opening. I threw myself into the project with enthusiasm I hadn't felt in years. I researched antique furniture at local shops, found vintage linens at estate sales, and even learned to refinish wood furniture in the garage. Rebecca seemed impressed by my energy and dedication. "Dorothy, you're a natural at this," she'd say, when I'd show her a chest of drawers I'd restored, or a set of curtains I'd sewn for one of the guest rooms. The work was physically demanding, but I loved every minute of it. I'd wake up at sunrise, eager to see what progress had been made the day before. I'd spend hours organizing the supply closets, creating inventory lists, and researching the best local suppliers for everything from cleaning products to breakfast ingredients. I felt useful, purposeful, like I was building something that would outlast me. Michael and I worked side by side many days, and it reminded me of when he was young and would help me with projects around the house. We'd laugh about old memories while we painted, or he'd ask my advice about how to wire a particular fixture. Those were precious moments, times when I felt like we were truly partners in this endeavor. Rebecca seemed to value my opinion during those early days. She'd ask me about color schemes, about what amenities guests might want, about my ideas for the breakfast menu. "Dorothy, you have such good instincts," she'd say. "This place is going to be special because of your input." I started keeping a journal during this time, documenting our progress and my thoughts about the business. I wrote about the day we installed the new hardwood floors, how beautiful they looked, gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. I wrote about finding the perfect chandelier for the dining room at an antique shop in Eureka Springs. I wrote about my excitement for the future, about the guests who would stay with us, about the memories we'd create together. Looking back now, I realize those were some of the happiest months of my life. I felt useful, needed, part of something bigger than myself. The hotel was going to be called the Maple Street Inn, a name I'd suggested in honor of my old house. Rebecca loved it, said it sounded homey and welcoming. I even started planning special touches that would make our guests feel extra welcome. I researched local attractions so I could give personalized recommendations. I collected recipes for regional specialties that I could serve at breakfast. I imagined greeting guests at the door, showing them to their rooms, making them feel like they were visiting family rather than just staying at a hotel. The renovations took 8 months, but every challenge felt like an adventure. When we discovered that the original hardwood floors were salvageable under layers of old carpet, I spent weeks on my hands and knees helping to sand and refinish them. When the original clawfoot tub in the master suite needed restoration, I researched the process and found a specialist who could make it look like new. There were delays, cost overruns, and moments of pure frustration. But slowly, the old Victorian house transformed into something beautiful. The guest rooms were elegant but comfortable, each with its own personality. The rose room had pink floral wallpaper and a 4-poster bed. The garden room overlooked the small courtyard I'd planted with herbs and flowers. The mountain view room had a balcony where guests could watch the sunrise over the Ozarks. The common areas were inviting, with comfortable seating and warm lighting. I'd selected every piece of furniture, every lamp, every decorative touch. The living room had a stone fireplace where guests could gather in the evenings, surrounded by bookcases filled with local history books and classic novels. The dining room had a long oak table where we'd serve breakfast family style, just like I'd always done in my own home. And the third-floor suite that was supposed to be my home was lovely. A bedroom with a queen-sized bed and a reading nook by the window, a small kitchen with everything I needed to prepare my own meals, and a sitting area with a bay window that looked out over the Ozark Mountains. I decorated it with my own furniture, my grandmother's quilt, and photographs of Michael's childhood. It felt like home, or at least like it could become home. We opened for business on a Friday in October, almost exactly a year after I'd sold my house. Our first guests were a couple from Chicago celebrating their anniversary. I remember how proud I felt when they complimented the breakfast I'd made, how they said the inn felt like visiting their grandmother's house. For the first 3 months, everything was perfect. We had a steady stream of guests, positive reviews online, and bookings that extended well into the next year. Rebecca handled the business side expertly, and Michael kept everything running smoothly. I cooked breakfasts, helped with housekeeping, and managed the front desk when needed. I loved the routine of running the inn. Every morning, I'd wake up before dawn to start preparing breakfast. I'd make fresh biscuits, scramble eggs with herbs from our garden, and brew coffee that guests said was the best they'd ever tasted. I'd set the dining room table with our best china, arrange fresh flowers in small vases, and create a warm, welcoming atmosphere that made people feel like they were having breakfast at their grandmother's house. The guests were wonderful. There was the elderly couple from Texas who stayed for a week every month, always requesting the Rose Room. There was the young family from Chicago who came for their daughter's birthday, and the little girl loved helping me feed the birds in the courtyard. There was the group of women friends who stayed with us during their annual girls' trip to Branson, and they'd sit in the living room every evening sharing stories and laughing until late. I kept a guest book where people could write comments about their stay, and reading those entries filled me with pride. Dorothy's breakfast was incredible. Felt like staying with family. The personal touches made all the difference. Can't wait to come back. These comments made all the hard work worthwhile. Michael seemed happy during those early months. He'd often join me in the kitchen in the mornings, and we'd chat while I cooked, and he handled maintenance issues. He'd tell me about his plans for expanding the herb garden, or about a new electrical project he was working on. It felt like we were truly partners, working together toward a common goal. Rebecca was busy with marketing and bookings, and she seemed pleased with our success. She'd show me our online reviews, our booking numbers, our revenue projections. "Dorothy, we're exceeding all our expectations," she'd say. "This place is going to be incredibly successful." I felt proud of what we'd built together. The inn was more than just a business. It was a place where people created memories, where families celebrated special occasions, where couples rekindled their romance. I felt like I was part of something meaningful, something that made a difference in people's lives. But then, gradually, things began to change. It started so subtly that I almost didn't notice at first. Rebecca would make decisions about the business without consulting me, even though technically I was a partner. She'd order supplies or change policies and then inform me after the fact. When I'd ask about it, she'd say she was just trying to be efficient, that she didn't want to bother me with every little detail. "Dorothy, you don't need to worry about the business side of things," she'd say. "You just focus on what you do best, taking care of the guests." At first, I thought she was being considerate. I was 73 after all, and maybe she was trying to spare me from unnecessary stress. But gradually, I realized that I was being systematically excluded from decisions that affected my investment, my home, my future. Then there were the comments about my cooking. "Dorothy, maybe we should simplify the breakfast menu," she'd say. "Guests today expect lighter options." Or, "I think we should consider hiring a professional chef. This is a business, not a bed and breakfast." The criticism stung, especially since guests consistently praised my breakfasts. I'd been cooking for guests for months, and I'd never received a single complaint. In fact, many guests specifically mentioned the breakfast as their favorite part of their stay. I started noticing that Rebecca and Michael would have long conversations in their bedroom with the door closed. When I'd ask what they were discussing, they'd say it was just business stuff, nothing I needed to worry about. But I could feel myself being excluded from decisions that affected my investment, my home, my future. The atmosphere in the house began to change. Where once there had been excited collaboration, now there was tension. Where once my opinions had been valued, now they were dismissed. Where once I'd felt like a partner, now I felt like an employee, and not a very appreciated one. I tried to talk to Michael about it, but he'd brush off my concerns. "Mom, you're imagining things," he'd say. "We're just trying to be more professional, more efficient. This is a business, not a family hobby." But I wasn't imagining things. I could see the way Rebecca would roll her eyes when I made suggestions. I could feel the way Michael would become impatient when I asked questions about business decisions. I could sense that they were making plans for the inn that didn't include me, despite the fact that I'd made it all possible. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in February. I was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for our guests when Rebecca came downstairs in her business suit, ready to leave for a meeting with potential investors. "Dorothy, We need to talk, she said, her voice different somehow, colder, more formal. What about? I asked, though something in her tone made my stomach clench. Michael and I have been discussing the direction of the business. We think it's time to make some changes. Michael appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. He wouldn't meet my eyes. What kind of changes? I asked. Rebecca sat down at the kitchen table and gestured for me to join her. We want to expand, maybe buy another property. But to do that, we need to streamline our operations here. We're thinking of hiring a management company to handle the day-to-day stuff. A management company? I repeated. But I thought this was a family business. It is, Michael said quickly. But Mom, you're 73. You shouldn't have to work so hard. You should be able to relax, enjoy your retirement. Something cold settled in my chest. This is my retirement, I said. This business, this partnership, it's what I invested my life savings in. Rebecca's smile was patient but patronizing. Dorothy, you've been wonderful. But Michael and I need to think about the future. We're young, we have energy, we have ideas. The business needs to grow, and that requires difficult decisions. What are you saying exactly? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. Michael finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before, something that looked almost like resentment. Mom, we think it would be best if you found your own place. Maybe a nice apartment in town, something smaller and easier to maintain. We can help you look, help you move. The words hit me like a physical blow. You want me to leave? It's not about wanting, Rebecca said. It's about what's best for everyone. You'd be happier in your own space, without the stress of running a business, and Michael and I need room to grow to make the changes necessary for success. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. I sold my house for this. I gave you my life savings. I thought I was investing in our future together. You were, Michael said, and we're grateful. But things change, Mom. Situations evolve. I'm your mother, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca stood up too, smoothing her skirt. Dorothy, we're not throwing you out. We're helping you transition to a new phase of your life. We'll make sure you're comfortable, that you have what you need. What I need, I said, feeling something breaking inside me, is the partnership I was promised. What I need is the home I was promised. What I need is the security I paid for. Michael's face hardened. Mom, you're being unreasonable. We're trying to do what's best for everyone. Best for everyone? I repeated. I invested $175,000 in this business. I worked every day for 8 months to make it successful. I gave up my home, my independence, my security, and now you want me to just walk away? No one's asking you to walk away, Rebecca said. We're asking you to step back, to let us run the business while you enjoy the fruits of your investment. From where? I asked. From some apartment in town while you live in the home I paid for? The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, Michael spoke, and his words changed everything. Mom, you're not welcome here anymore. I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. Those words, you're not welcome here, echoed in my mind as I stared at my son, this man I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. The man who had just told me I wasn't welcome in the business I'd funded, the home I'd paid for, the future I'd invested in. I walked upstairs to my suite and sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd saved, everything I'd built, it was all slipping away. But as I sat there, something else began to grow alongside the heartbreak, anger. I wasn't some naive old woman who didn't understand business. I wasn't some charity case who should be grateful for whatever scraps they chose to give me. I was a partner in this business, and I had rights. The next morning, I called a lawyer. His name was James Mitchell, and he specialized in business law. When I told him my story, he listened carefully, taking notes and asking detailed questions about the financial arrangements, the partnership agreements, and the property ownership. Mrs. Henderson, he said when I finished, do you have documentation of your investment? I did. I had the real estate closing documents from the sale of my house, the bank records showing the transfer of funds, and most importantly, the partnership agreement that Rebecca had insisted we sign for tax purposes. At the time, I'd been grateful for her business acumen. Now I realized it might be my salvation. Mr. Mitchell reviewed the documents carefully. "This is interesting," he said. "According to this partnership agreement, you own a 35% stake in the business. You're entitled to 35% of all profits, and you have a say in all major business decisions." "But they're trying to push me out," I said. "They can't," he said simply. "Not without buying out your share at fair market value, and given the success of the business, that would be a substantial amount, probably more than they can afford." He leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Henderson, you have options. You can force them to honor the partnership agreement, or you can demand they buy you out. Either way, you're not powerless in this situation." I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. That afternoon, I called a meeting with Michael and Rebecca. They seemed surprised when I requested that we meet in the inn's conference room with all the business documents spread out on the table. "What's this about, Mom?" Michael asked, looking nervous. "This is about our business partnership," I said calmly. "The one that gives me a 35% stake in this company and a say in all major decisions." Rebecca's face went pale. "Dorothy, we've already discussed this. We think it's time for you to step back. And I think it's time for you to honor your legal obligations," I said. I placed a letter from Mr. Mitchell on the table. "This is from my attorney. He's reviewed our partnership agreement, and he's made it very clear that you cannot force me out of a business I own 1/3 of." Michael picked up the letter and read it, his face growing darker with each paragraph. "You hired a lawyer? Against us?" "I hired a lawyer to protect my interests," I said. "The same way you and Rebecca have been protecting yours." "Mom, this is ridiculous," Michael said. "We're family. We shouldn't need lawyers." "You're right," I said. "We shouldn't. But you made it clear that I'm not welcome in this family business, so I decided to treat it as what it apparently is, a business arrangement between partners." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. "What do you want, Dorothy?" "I want what was promised to me," I said. "I want my partnership honored, my voice heard, and my investment respected. Or if you prefer, you can buy me out at fair market value." "How much?" Michael asked. Mr. Mitchell had the business appraised. "Based on current bookings, revenue projections, and property value, my 35% stake is worth approximately $280,000. Rebecca laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "We don't have that kind of money." "Then I suggest you learn to work with a partner," I said. The next few weeks were tense. Michael and Rebecca tried to make my life difficult, assigning me menial tasks, excluding me from meetings, and generally making it clear that they resented my presence. But I held my ground. I showed up every day, did my job, and insisted on being included in all business decisions. Slowly, grudgingly, they began to accept that I wasn't going anywhere. And gradually, I realized that I had a choice to make. I could stay and fight for my place in a business where I clearly wasn't wanted, or I could find another way forward. The decision came to me one morning as I was serving breakfast to a young couple on their honeymoon. They were so happy, so full of hope for their future together, and I realized that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a place filled with resentment and anger. That afternoon, I made Michael and Rebecca an offer. I would sell them my share of the business for $200,000, $80,000 less than the appraised value, but enough to secure my future. In return, they would have to pay me immediately, and I would sign a non-compete agreement that would prevent me from opening a competing business in the area. They accepted immediately, probably thinking they were getting a great deal. I could see the relief on their faces, the satisfaction of finally getting what they wanted. Michael actually smiled for the first time in weeks. "Mom, this is probably for the best," he said. "You'll be much happier in your own place." Rebecca was already making plans. "We can help you find a nice apartment," she said. "Maybe something with a view, close to shopping. You won't have to worry about anything." But I wasn't planning to worry about anything. I was planning to take control of my future. Within 2 weeks, the papers were signed, and I had a check for $200,000 in my hand. I also had something else, a carefully worded non-compete agreement that their lawyer had written too hastily. But I had one more surprise for them. The non-compete agreement they'd insisted on only covered the Branson area. It said nothing about the rest of Missouri, or any other state for that matter. Their lawyer had been sloppy, probably thinking they were dealing with a naive old woman who wouldn't understand the fine print. They were wrong. I'd been doing some research during the negotiations, quietly exploring options for my future. I'd contacted real estate agents in different cities, researched business opportunities, and even consulted with a business advisor about starting my own venture. 2 days after I signed the buyout agreement, I put a deposit down on a beautiful old house in Springfield, Missouri, 2 hours away from Branson, far enough to avoid any legal issues, but close enough that Emma and Jake could still visit me. The house was built in 1925, a charming 2-story craftsman with a wraparound porch and a garden that had been lovingly maintained by the previous owner. It had 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a large kitchen with original hardwood floors. The living room had built-in bookshelves and a stone fireplace. The dining room had a bay window that overlooked the garden. It needed some work, but nothing major. The previous owner had been an elderly woman who'd maintained it well, but hadn't updated it in decades. The electrical system needed upgrading, the plumbing needed some attention, and several rooms needed fresh paint. But the bones of the house were solid, and I could see its potential immediately. Most importantly, it had something my son's hotel didn't. It was mine, completely and legally mine. I spent the next month moving in and making the house my own. I hired contractors to update the electrical and plumbing, but I did most of the cosmetic work myself. I painted walls, refinished floors, and hung wallpaper. I planted flowers in the garden and installed a bird feeder outside the kitchen window. I spent the next month furnishing the house, painting walls, and turning it into a home. I bought new furniture, hung pictures, and even adopted a little terrier mix from the local animal shelter. I named him Harold, after my late husband, and he became my constant companion. Harold was a scrappy little dog with wiry brown fur and bright eyes that seemed to understand everything I said. He'd follow me around the house while I worked, curl up beside me in the evenings, and greet me with enthusiasm every morning. Having him there made the house feel less empty, less lonely. I also made friends with my neighbors. Mrs. Chen next door was a retired teacher who loved to garden, and she helped me plan the landscaping for the backyard. Mr. and Mrs. Williams across the street were in their 80s and had lived in the neighborhood for 50 years. They told me stories about the area, recommended local businesses, and made me feel welcome. But I wasn't done yet. I had a plan, and I was determined to see it through. 3 months after I moved to Springfield, I filed the paperwork to open Dorothy's Haven, a small bed and breakfast that would cater to women traveling alone. I'd identified a gap in the market during my research. Many women were hesitant to travel alone, worried about safety and comfort. I wanted to create a place where they could feel secure and pampered. The house was perfect for it. The 4 bedrooms could accommodate guests, and the large kitchen was ideal for preparing homemade breakfasts. The living room and dining room provided comfortable common areas where guests could relax and socialize. The garden offered a peaceful retreat where visitors could read or simply enjoy the outdoors. I threw myself into the preparations with the same enthusiasm I'd brought to the Maple Street Inn. I researched licensing requirements, health department regulations, and insurance policies. I designed marketing materials, created a website, and established relationships with local suppliers. Each guest room had its own personality. The sunrise room faced east and was decorated in soft yellows and whites. The garden room overlooked the backyard and featured floral patterns and natural wood accents. The lavender room was painted in soothing purples and had a reading nook by the window. The rose room was romantic and feminine, with antique furniture and vintage linens. The business was small but successful from the start. I had repeat customers, positive reviews, and most importantly, I had something that had been missing from my life for months: joy. I loved cooking breakfast for my guests, loved hearing their stories, loved being part of their adventures. My first guest was a woman named Sarah, who was traveling to Springfield for a job interview. She was nervous about the interview and about being in a new city alone. I made her feel welcome, gave her advice about the area, and cooked her a special breakfast on the morning of her interview. She got the job and still sends me Christmas cards. Then there was Margaret, a widow who was traveling across the country to visit her grandchildren. She stayed with me for 3 nights, and we spent hours talking about our lives, our losses, and our hopes for the future. She left feeling refreshed and confident about her journey. There was also Jessica, a young professional who was attending a conference in Springfield. She was intimidated by the thought of networking events and business dinners, but I helped her practice her elevator pitch and gave her advice about professional attire. She left with new confidence and several valuable business contacts. These women, and dozens of others, found more than just a place to stay at Dorothy's Haven. They found encouragement, support, and friendship. They found a place where they could be themselves, where their stories mattered, where they were valued for who they were rather than dismissed for who they weren't. 6 months after I opened, I got a call from Michael. The Maple Street Inn was struggling, he said. Rebecca was pregnant and couldn't work as much. They were falling behind on their loan payments and needed help. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I genuinely was. But I'm sure you'll figure it out. Mom, we made a mistake, he said. We need you. The business needs you. The business you told me I wasn't welcome in? I asked. There was a long pause. I was wrong to say that. I was stressed and scared, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry. I appreciate the apology, I said. But I'm not available to help. I have my own business to run now. Your own business? He asked, surprised. Dorothy's Haven. It's a bed and breakfast here in Springfield. I'm booked solid through the end of the year. Another pause. You started a competing business? I started my own business, I corrected. One where I'm welcome, where my contributions are valued, and where I have complete control over my future. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Mom, I don't understand why you're doing this. We're family. Yes, we are, I said. And I love you. But Michael, you taught me an important lesson. You showed me that family doesn't automatically mean security, that love doesn't automatically mean respect, and that being someone's mother doesn't automatically mean being welcome in their life. That's not fair, he said. Maybe not, I agreed. But it's true, and it's a lesson I needed to learn. We talked for a few more minutes, and he promised to bring Emma and Jake to visit me soon. I hoped he would. I missed my grandchildren terribly, and I wanted them to see that their grandmother was strong, independent, and happy. That conversation was 8 months ago. Emma and Jake have visited twice, and both times they were amazed by Dorothy's Haven. Emma, who's 14 now, said she wants to learn to run a business like mine. Jake, who's 11, loves helping me in the garden and playing with Harold. Michael comes with them sometimes, and we're slowly rebuilding our relationship. He's never apologized for taking my money or for telling me I wasn't welcome, but he's begun to treat me with something that looks like respect. I think he's finally realized that his mother is tougher than he thought. Rebecca has never visited, and I don't expect she will. I heard through mutual friends that the Maple Street Inn is for sale. They couldn't make it work without my experience, my work ethic, and my financial cushion. I'm not glad about their failure, but I'm not sorry either. As for me, I'm happier than I've been in years. Dorothy's Haven is everything I wanted the Maple Street Inn to be, a place where people feel welcome, where hard work is valued, and where I have control over my own destiny. I have friends in Springfield, a garden that I'm proud of, and a business that supports me comfortably. The success of Dorothy's Haven has exceeded my wildest expectations. In my first year, I was booked solid for 8 months. I've had to turn away guests, which is both a blessing and a challenge. I'm considering expanding, maybe converting the detached garage into a small cottage that could house additional guests. I've also become involved in the local business community. I joined the Springfield Chamber of Commerce and serve on the committee for promoting tourism in the area. I've been featured in several local publications, and a travel blog even wrote an article about Dorothy's Haven titled "A Hidden Gem for Solo Female Travelers." The recognition is gratifying, but what means more to me is the impact I'm having on the women who stay here. I keep a photo album of guests who've given me permission to take their pictures, and I love looking through it and remembering their stories. There's Sandra, who was traveling to her first job interview in 15 years after being a stay-at-home mom. There's Patricia, who was driving across the country after her divorce, discovering her independence for the first time. There's Lisa, who was visiting colleges with her daughter and staying with me while her daughter stayed in the dorms. Each woman who walks through my door brings her own story, her own dreams, her own challenges. And I get to be a small part of their journey. offering them comfort, encouragement, and a safe place to rest. It's more fulfilling than any business venture I could have imagined. I've also reconnected with old friends from my neighborhood in ways I never expected. Mrs. Patterson visits me every few months, and she's amazed by what I've accomplished. "Dorothy, you look 10 years younger," she told me on her last visit. "You're glowing with purpose." Mr. Rodriguez has even sent me referrals, women from his church who are traveling for various reasons. "Dorothy runs the safest, most welcoming place for ladies traveling alone," he tells them. The trust and respect of my former neighbors means the world to me. Most importantly, I have my dignity. I have the satisfaction of knowing that when someone I loved betrayed me, I didn't just survive, I thrived. I turned their rejection into my liberation, their dismissal into my independence, their lack of vision into my opportunity. The transformation hasn't been easy. There were nights when I lay in bed wondering if I'd made the right choice, if I was too old to start over, if I should have just accepted the small apartment and quiet retirement that Michael and Rebecca had envisioned for me. But every morning when I wake up in my own house and see the sunrise through my bedroom window, I know I made the right choice. I've learned that age is just a number, that it's never too late to reinvent yourself, that you don't have to accept other people's limitations on your life. I've learned that being underestimated can be an advantage, that people will dismiss you at their own peril, that wisdom and experience are valuable assets that shouldn't be discarded. I've also learned that family is complicated, that love doesn't always mean respect, that sometimes the people who should support you are the ones who hold you back. But I've also learned that forgiveness is possible, that relationships can be rebuilt, that love can survive even the deepest wounds. I'm 74 now, and I know I won't live forever. But I also know that I'll never again put my security in someone else's hands, no matter how much I love them. I'll never again assume that being family means being valued, or that sacrifice automatically earns respect. I'll never again accept being told I'm not welcome in a life I helped create. The young women who stay at Dorothy's Haven sometimes ask me for advice about their own lives, their own relationships, their own struggles with family and money and independence. I tell them what I learned the hard way, that you can love someone completely and still need to protect yourself from them. That being generous doesn't mean being foolish, that starting over at 73 is scary but possible, that being underestimated can be your greatest advantage. And I tell them that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you. Because losing my home, my security, and my son's respect taught me something invaluable. That I'm stronger than I ever knew, that I'm capable of more than I ever imagined, and that I don't need anyone else's permission to build a life worth living. I tell them about the importance of financial independence, about reading the fine print, about trusting their instincts when something doesn't feel right. I tell them about the power of starting over, about the courage it takes to leave a situation that isn't working, about the strength they have inside them that they might not even know exists. Every morning, I wake up in my own house, in my own bed, with my own dog sleeping at my feet. I make my own coffee, tend my own garden, and run my own business. I check my bookings, plan my menus, and prepare to welcome new guests into my home. And every single day, I'm grateful for the lesson my son taught me, that being unwelcome in someone else's life is sometimes the first step toward being completely welcome in your own. The sun is setting now, as I finish writing this letter. Harold is curled up beside me, and I can hear the voices of my guests downstairs, sharing stories and laughter over evening tea. Tomorrow, I'll wake up early to prepare breakfast for them, to make sure they feel welcome in my home. I'll listen to their plans for the day, offer suggestions for local attractions, and send them off with encouragement and good wishes. And I'll remember, as I do every day, that I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. I'm building something meaningful, something that matters, something that makes a difference in the world. I'm proving that it's never too late to start over, never too late to follow your dreams, never too late to show the world what you're capable of. If you're reading this and you're facing your own challenges, your own betrayals, your own moments of being told you're not welcome, I want you to know that you have more strength than you realize. You have more options than you think. You have more power than anyone has told you. Don't let anyone else define your worth. Don't let anyone else determine your future. Don't let anyone else convince you that you're not capable of more than you've already achieved. Take control of your own story. Write your own ending. Build your own future. And remember that being unwelcome in someone else's life might just be the invitation you need to create a life that's completely, authentically, beautifully your own. With love and hope, Dorothy Mae Henderson, Springfield, Missouri.